Faustino Morales to lead the opening prayer.
Let us put ourselves in the presence of God. Dearest Lord, we thank you for bringing us together today. We ask that you be with us as we listen to the speakers, as well as contribute to the dialogue that this event aims to foster. We also ask that we take from this not only newfound knowledge of the humanities, but also the spirit to share that knowledge with the rest of society. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Amen.
Please be seated. So good morning, everyone. Distinguished guests, faculty members and staff, teachers and fellow students. Welcome to the Lost Art of Reading, establishing the foundations for an enduring education at the Jubilee anniversary of UA&P.
Okay, so allow us to introduce ourselves. We are your hosts for this morning's event. I am Sandra Wrench, a senior humanities student under the master's program.
And I am Ari Morales, a super senior humanities student, also under the master's program.
So, Ari, what do we have in store for everyone today?
Well, Sandra, this event was organized by Logos, the official school organization of the humanities program of UA&P. For this event, we will be hearing from a line of brilliant-minded individuals who are here to discuss and elaborate on the skill of reading as applied in the humanities and in specialized disciplines.
Also, they are here to share with us their insights on the value of the liberal arts and the particular richness that we can only gain by reading.
Great. Now I think we should just leave it to our speakers to delve into these topics, because I'm sure everyone's excited to hear from these intellectual giants.
Okay, first let us welcome our speaker. He is a demigod, source of all wisdom. He is the inspiration of all Paris schools from Cebu to the whole nation. He is recently associate professor. He is the real Renaissance man of the Philippines. Let us welcome Dr. Paul A. Dumol.
Thank you, Sandra. With that, I'll give you a one.
Scratch my knuckle, work my knuckle.
Well, I have only one point I wish to make this morning, and that is that the art of reading shifts depending on the kind of text before the reader. The texts differ depending on genre, which I assume you understand, and depending on the discipline from which the texts come. The art of reading prose is not the same as the art of reading poetry, which is not the same as the art of reading dialogue. You know this. Further, the art of reading literature is not the same as the art of reading history, which is not the same as the art of reading philosophy or reading theology, and so on. You should know this, fourth-year students especially. If you leave UA&P with only one skill set, knowing how to read different texts, then your years in college would have been worth it, because you are ready to learn on your own for the rest of your life. That is really what we mean by lifelong learning. I think it's basically mastering the art of reading. You could include mastering the art of listening, but it's easier to find intelligent books to read than intelligent people to listen to. So your bet on reading is safer. Now, I want to demonstrate the art of reading in this talk, and how this involves the three subjects that make up the trivium in the liberal arts curriculum. And the trivium is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. I want to spend a few minutes on logic. By logic, we often understand the use of syllogisms. This is one type of logic, but many people think is the only way to understand logic. There are many other types, and these other types correspond to different kinds of texts. So I have prepared two quotations from the Spanish philosopher Leonardo Dumol on this topic. Let's see. Okay. You have your handkerchiefs ready. Those please. Aristotle as a thinker is sufficiently open to reality to realize that not all fields admit the same type of knowledge. Aristotle is not a panlogician. It's a panlogician. This is somebody who wants to apply logic to everything that he reads. His logic is, Aristotle's logic, is not only one. And this because he is aware that by the way we approach them, or by their very nature, the regions of reality cannot be formally studied in the same way. So, in other words, reality is diverse, and there are different ways of studying it which are appropriate to whatever area of reality that is, or Paulus's region. And the logic changes according to that area of reality. The Analytics is the book of Aristotle which deals with syllogisms. The Analytics does not exhaust logic. Okay? A greater flexibility is necessary. Logic should adapt itself to other ways of knowing, to distinct types of reality in accordance with their accessibility. We have knowledge that is merely probable, so now he's explaining the types of reality. We have knowledge that is merely probable, or that does not enjoy a total warranty, which we should not renounce merely because of this. From this point of view, Aristotle is the antithesis of skepticism, because he admits the relativity of much of our knowledge, and nevertheless does not renounce them or value them pejoratively. Did you survive that? It says the same thing as the first slide, but goes into a little bit more of detail. I think what's important here is the other types of knowledge that he talks about. Knowledge that is merely probable, or that does not enjoy a total warranty, meaning to say, knowledge which you can't prove completely. This would be theological mysteries, for example. Okay, and each one of those generates its own logic, which you have to apply to understand it. Okay, now to demonstrate the art of reading as it shifts according to different texts, I will share with you the work we have done in my class when your two announcers are involved. My class in Dante and T.S. Eliot, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to. Analyzing the first part of Eliot's The Wasteland. Now, I was going to make this an interactive session, but I realized that I have less than half an hour. So I'm going to go through the slides which I've prepared. I really don't need to go through all of them, but if I go too fast, and therefore the point is not clear, please raise your hand and we'll slow down. And my students who are distributed here can whisper to you. Please identify them. I introduced this as the work of the class because that's really what it is. It's a summary of our work so far in the semester, at least part of it. I'm very proud of them, and I'm very happy to say that there are new insights which I picked up in this class in relation to Eliot's great poem. This is the last slide of the previous topic. These are the other books of Aristotle which deal with the other kinds of logic aside from the analytics. not bring their binoculars, are welcome to bring their seats forward here. But this is the first stanza of The Wasteland. April is the cruelest month. Reading, lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. Summer surprised us, coming over the Starnberger Sea with a shower of rain. We stopped in the colonnade and went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten and drank coffee and talked for an hour. Bin gar keine Rusing, stam aus Litauen, echt Deutsch. And when we were children, staying at the Archduke's, my cousins, he took me out in a sled, and I was frightened. He said, Marie, Marie, hold on tight. And down we went, in the mountains. There you feel free. I read much of the night and go south in the winter. Okay, just leave it there. Don't touch it. Go back. That's the next. Go back to the first slide. To the first slide. That's not the first slide. All right. So that's the first. You don't need to hide. Get a chair. Here. Okay, that's the first stanza. I don't think there's anything which needs a dictionary except the verse in German, right? Everything else uses vocabulary which is familiar to us, but we may be scratching our heads. And the first thing we did in our class was to divide it into parts, main parts. And this is what came out. Don't expand it. Right, the first part, which is April is the cruelest month, reading lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain, winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tubers. The second part is the rest of it, starting with summer surprised us, coming over the Starnberger Sea, etc. up to the end. I read much of the night and go south in the winter. I was impressed that we didn't need a whole lot of time to come up with this major division. And the reason is a change in tone. That if you go through it, we should go through it more slowly without okay? You will notice a change in tone between those first 7 verses and then the rest of it. The rest is chattier, okay? Seems to be part of a conversation. The first part is more meditative. Somebody thinking slowly. And how does the art of reading apply there? Your inner ear has to be alert just to the change in tone. Because the change in tone affects the way you will interpret the text. So we're going to look at that now. We're going to look at the way the first part is interpreted in contrast to the second part. Makikita niyo, okay ba? Right, that's the first part. Okay. Right. You can read it, people at the back. No? Mio, can you read it? Yes. If Mio can read it, you will get. He has glasses. We split it into 2. Because the first part of the first part is about spring. And then the second part is about winter, change in subject matter. Still the same voice. And then, that's the first part. Seeing it? We isolated that verse. And this is the interactive part, pero wala tayong bonus. So I will just give you the answer. Because if you look at the rest of the lines, you can make sense of them literally. Well, yeah, I think so. That this is about vegetation in spring. But the minute you put in mixing memory and desire, medyo iba na ito. Okay. This is the second part. And then analyzing it, after discussion, we identified these lines, covering earth in forgetful snow. And of course, the important word is forgetful, because the other parts, you can read them also literally, but with forgetful, you cannot. So, what do we have here? Basically, you've got a text which you can read on one level as being about vegetation. But then at the other level, it's about people. Mixing memory and desire, covering earth in forgetful snow. The art of reading, where does it enter here? It's a sensitivity to a shift in the kind of text that we have before us. You have something literal and then it changes into something figurative. And then it goes back to literal. Now, this sounds complicated, but in fact, this is the method in homilies, sermons. Our Lord's preaching in the gospel. From my own study, I think the model of Eliot for this part of his point, in fact, is a 17th century Anglican pastor, at least in the tone. So I'm telling that to you because you might start thinking, wow, this is really difficult, but it's not, this is ordinary. But we have to be sensitive precisely to these shifts. All right, this is the second part. You can read it? Yes. Actually, you can stay there if you wish. Thank you. Summer surprised us, coming over the Sandberger Sea with a shower of rain. We stopped in the colonnade and went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten and drank coffee and talked for an hour. Understand? Bin gar keine Russen, samaus Litauen and Deutsch. We aren't Russians, we live in Lithuania, but they are Germans, she says. And when we were children, staying at the Archduke's, my cousins, he took me out on a sled, and I was frightened. He said, Marie, Marie, hold on tight, and down we went. In the mountains, there we feel free. I read much of the night, and go south in the winter. We understand and we do not understand. There's something a bit odd about it, right? So our class went through the same exercise of dividing it in two parts. And this is what we came out with, 4 parts. The first one looks like a recollection of an afternoon in Vienna. It's all in Vienna. And then there is that isolated quotation in Russian. And then a recollection of, I guess, a skiing excursion or a sledding excursion. And then a single line which is different from all the rest because it talks about the speaker's usual activities. But looking close, you see how different it is from part one. I hope you do. And that's the basis of separating them. But the big question is, why is a discontinuity? Because they're really fragments. They're really fragments. And that's again part of the art of reading. That as you read it, it sense a discontinuity. Discontinuity can come in various forms. Here, it's simply the shifts from a recollection of summer, and then it shifts to a recollection of winter, and then it shifts to a general statement. And then the Russian line seems to be the memory of something that someone said. Probably from the Vienna recollection. So that's part, again, of the art of reading. Detecting the discontinuities. But I think that the big question in everybody's mind is, what's the connection of this to the first part which we just saw? Right? Okay. Marami kaming diskusyon doon. And this is what we came out with, going fast. So, on the left, you have the first part. On the right, the second. After much discussion, we said that the second part is the little life which is referred to in the last line of the first part. I'm skipping a lot of things. But in other words, the first part is about people who are like plants buried under the earth and who do not want to, quotation marks, wake up during spring. They wish to continue hibernating, so to speak, during that winter. And winter is defined as forgetful snow feeding a little life with dried tubers. So not dead, but not quite alive. And we connected the whole second part to that little life because the observation was mababaw. So the second part is obviously referring to the life of the rich and famous. Maybe the very first part of that is tourism. The second part is the skiing excursion, yung pamangkin, yung tiyo niya. No, pinsan is an archduke, right? And then afterwards, the leisure time, okay, that these people have. And that we see is the little life. Right. There are a huge number of implications there about what Eliot is saying in this first stanza, but we're not going to go into that because that's not the purpose of this session, right? But here, the art of reading, as you see, is partly the art of connecting parts with parts. This one we didn't take up in class. While preparing these slides, it suddenly occurred to me. So, makinig mo tayo sa dito. Right. So, same thing. First part, second part. I read the second part more slowly. And there's one verse there. In the mountains, there you feel free. I think we all understand what the speaker means. Maybe for Filipinos, the equivalent is snorkeling or diving. And then there under the water in a completely different world, you feel free. But we can ask ourselves the question, free of what? Free of your peers, free of the ordinary workaday world. But I think you could imagine that that is a moment while skiing in the mountains and looking at these huge mountains surrounding you, that you can experience the first part or the first sub-part that we looked at. April is the coolest month, breathing lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. It is a commonplace in literature, diaries, that people on top of mountains or deep in the ocean in coral gardens, they suddenly feel closer to God, or to the sublime, or to a completely different reality, which they had not experienced before, but always sensed was there. I hope all of us in this room have had that kind of experience at one moment in our life. And that is the moment which is being referred to in the first part. Bringing in theology, I guess you could say that's a moment of grace. Eliot is very English, British. Actually, he's American. So very Anglo-Saxon. He will never mention grace. But then, mixing memory and desire, stilling dull roots with spring rain. It seems like the perfect moment to think, baka masyadong mababaw itong buhay ko. Dapat ang magbago. In the mountains, there you feel free. So this illustrates to us the same thing previously, pero may baliktad. One verse here on the right, accounting for a set of verses on the left. And the art of reading is that way, that your mind can shift, considering a whole set of lines and reducing them to one verse in a previous part, and then reversing it, a whole set of lines, and then reducing them to a verse in another part. Okay. Why do I have that there? Okay, all I wanted to tell you was, at this point, is that obviously the idea of vegetation under snow, buried in the earth, is a metaphor, right? And that metaphor, that type of metaphor, in Tagalog talinghaga, actually kung tinawag mo siyang talinghaga, it does not seem as mysterious. Because that is how we understand talinghaga. Something ordinary, which has a deeper meaning. As in Proverbs, Tagalog Proverbs, and riddles. So this method of the talinghaga, this comes from 17th century English poets. They're known as the metaphysical poets, where they've got really this very elaborate metaphors for ordinary human experiences. I mentioned them to you so that you can Google them afterwards. Eliot was very fond of these, and I think you see this here. The art of reading is to realize when you are faced with a metaphor, which you should therefore not take literally. Okay. This is the second part. Second stanza. Okay. What are the roots that clutch? I think Mio still has a tough time reading. Mio has disappeared. Okay. What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images, where the sun beats and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock, and I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Frisch wird der Wind, der Heimat zu, mein inniges Kind, wo weilest du? You gave me hyacinths first, a year ago. They called me the hyacinth girl. Yet when we came back late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet, I could not speak and my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing, looking into the heart of light, the silence. It mir das mir. The weird languages are German. Right. So, our class did the same thing, divided into parts. This one was easier to divide into parts. There you have a first part. What are the roots that clutch, what branches grow all the way to I will show you fear in a handful of dust. A second part, which is the first German quotation. A third, which begins with the quotation and then is followed by, it looks like a reply. And then the last would be another quotation in German. Right? Well, I see I have 5 minutes. See? Now you have to rely on my students. Okay. So we took a look at the first part. What are the roots that clutch, what branches grow out of this rubbish? We identified that as the first part of this longer quotation. It's a question. And it refers to a vision. Person must be seeing a vision. And then, Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images, where the sun beats and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. We identify that as the second part. Which is basically to say, hindi mo masasagot yung tanong ko. And I will give you the reasons. And there are the reasons there. And the rest of it is a third part. Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock, and I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Well, this part is the reason why that person is being shown that vision, which he's being asked to interpret. Okay? The vision is a stony rubbish with roots and branches growing out of it. And then something else, there's a red rock with a shadow. And he's being invited to enter there. So I think once you examine these sentences, you immediately see the parts. Because each sentence is different from the rest. First you have a question, then you have a remark which says you cannot answer the question, right? And then finally, a part which says, okay, do this. First is a challenge. What's the relationship of all of these three? But as I said, that is not our purpose this morning, but rather the art of reading. So here, you've got three sentences, and you sense how each one is different from the rest in a way that is different from that set of recollections in the previous stanza. That one, of course, each sentence is talking about a memory. But the differences between the memories is not as radical as the differences between these sentences. And again, this is something that we feel. Okay? You don't need to bring in any special instruments or special educational background. No. Right. So, Eliot has notes, endnotes, to two verses in this part. The first note appears in the first sentence, first question, to Ezekiel. And then the second note corresponds to the second part. And again, with discussions, we came to the conclusion that Ezekiel is cited because Ezekiel was the prophet who encouraged the Israelites to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the ruined temple. Okay. So he's giving us a hint about how to interpret the first part. Texts illuminating texts. Part of the art of reading, crisscrossing from one text to another. The second one comes from Ecclesiastes. And in the part of Ecclesiastes where it appears, the author is scolding, you may say, people who have forgotten God and are concerned only with this life. So, mukhang yun ang ibig sabihin ng second part. Then in our further discussion, I pointed out to them that these broken images cannot be the Temple of Jerusalem because bawal yun eh. Okay? Among the Jews, you cannot have images. So it's got to refer to Christian times. So it probably refers to England, to modern civilization. Okay, we're not going to interpret because this is just to point out again another dimension of the art of reading. I think I should stop there because it's already a quarter to 10. That's the end. This is going to be the second part. At mahaba yung second part na you can ask Sandra. Very complicated. This is the telenovela portion. Yes, but a very interesting one. Okay, let me make some kind of summary. What I've tried to show you is how the art of reading, which I assume all of us possess, keeps on changing depending on the text that is there before you. And it's got to change in order to decode what that text wants to say. And then, depending on the document that you have in front of you, you may need to compare text with text in order to come out with a meaning that you do not find isolated, in isolation, in any of those parts. And again, my closing remark is that if you graduate from this school with nothing else but the art of reading and knowing when to shift from one kind of text to another, we will have succeeded in this university. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dumol. I think it's safe to assume that we are all better human beings after that. Okay.
So for our second speaker, we have another demigod He was the former president of the university, even before most of us were born. He teaches foundations of the humanities, and he is the foundation of the humanities program here in the university. Dr. Ligdao calls him the wise sage. Dr. Laksamana calls him the epic teacher. So let's welcome Dr. Josemaria G. Mariano.
Good morning. I'd like to give you a little time to set it up. The original title of this talk is interdisciplinary. What is it? It's interdisciplinarity and the humanities. But I'm entitling it mathematics and humanities, and the change will be explained in a while. Well, the first talk in this colloquium largely concerned the trivium, that is grammar, logic, and rhetoric, which are the arts of reading. I shall speak on behalf of the quadrivium. This is the name given to 4 other arts that were among the staples of classical education when the liberal arts settled down in the Middle Ages into the well-known list of 7